All right, you all. We're going to get started with our next session. This session is going to cover how colleges and universities are educating around the topics of climate change, sustainability, and resilience through research and community engagement. We have two speakers from higher ed, local universities that will speak to us today. And our first one will be Jasleen Dillon. Jasleen is the Assistant Director at the Hunt Institute of Engineering and Humanities at SMU. This institute is focused on technology, innovation, and sustainability through engineering with both students, faculty, staff throughout the community. Jasleen will cover the topics evolved around her center or the institute, the interests of sustainability, and what is she doing to lead that charge on behalf of the university. So please help me in welcoming Jasleen to the stage.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasleen Dillon. Like Opong said, I'm the Assistant Director of the Hunt Institute for Engineering and Humanity at Southern Methodist University. Just like a quick show of hands, how many of you have heard of our institute before? Wonderful, that's fantastic. I always like to gauge because we spread our wings wide, but you never know who you impact with all the things that we do. So we are an institute that's housed in the Lyle School of Engineering at SMU physically, but we service all SMU students. We are a institute that was funded about 10 or so years ago, all focused about how to bridge science with humanities. We're funded by Hunter and Stephanie Hunt, who had this initial passion. How can we get students engaged in engineering while making them understand that there is a purpose driven behind the engineering? So we had a lot of projects historically focused on Engineering and Humanity Weeks, designing infrastructure for critical situations like flooding, droughts, hurricanes, things that impact humanity, but also have a social impact as well. We've done things like seed funding for faculty research for grants. We've done community programs, everything to impact nights, where we do a different impact every Thursday of every month, or we've done community programmings around GIS mapping for sustainability tools, understanding how you can take a technological tool and use it to implement social and economic issues in your area. From that, over the past 10 to 12 years, we've done a lot of things in our suite, some successful, some not successful, but it has all culminated into three main pillars at the Institute that we focus on when it comes to student, faculty, staff, and community engagement. Those are energy, humanitarian engineering, and sustainability. The first pillar, engineering or energy, has to do with energy research and applicability to Dallas mostly, but also in a global context. So we have faculty members who come into our suite who do geothermal research, who do grid power utilization, who do optimization, who do power engineering, who do engineering management or operations research around supply chain for energy vendors. Everything, the whole gamut of energy. We have faculty members who come in saying they want students to engage with us and they want industrial partnerships to help kind of translate the research that you're doing into a more real world scenario. So what we do is we do a lot of engineering-based matchmaking for our students to make sure that they're getting that real-world experience while also complementing it in their academics. Something interesting to kind of piggyback off of the last session is there was a lot of energy-based research projects we've been doing in the data center world. There's a lot of opportunity for our students to get involved and sort of tackle these energy efficiency challenges in the place where it is. I think we are the second largest data center region in the nation, just second of Virginia, but closely becoming the first. So as we are a hub of engineering and energy in Dallas, it's pertinent that we get our students more involved in research related to data centers, while also acknowledging that there is a social context to it as they work on those projects for data centers and faculty members. The second initiative is humanitarian engineering. This is led by a faculty member who does international projects, where she goes and does humanitarian frugal innovation tactics for people who live in Tanzania and Colombia. Students can engage with this in many different ways. The most pertinent is the Civil and Environmental Engineering's Global Development minor, where students at the freshman level take on a research project that has to do with something engineering and humanities related in their first year at SMU. And this is a requirement if you want to get the Global Development minor, but they're able to go through the whole class where at the end they develop a research science poster where they ask their own hypothesis and try to figure out the validation themselves. So from a freshman year all the way to the end of their 4 years, they're able to start with humanities and engineering projects and carry those forward if they're interested in pursuing it even after the class is over. And the last bucket is sustainability, which is where I am the most passionate for. We do a lot of community engagement and experiential learning opportunities for our students to engage them in environmental and sustainability programs. We done a data center summit recently where we engaged students and CEOs of data centers in Texas in a one-day conference on our campus. This happened last Thursday, where we had regulators, we had vice presidents, we had students that were engaged in engineering sustainability issues, all in a room together, asking each other the questions they wanted answered. We had a Q&A session where the students asked those hard questions. What does a data center mean for me? What am I supposed to do about it? Can you actually give me an honest answer? And it opened up collaboration opportunities for students to engage with people who can obviously get them a job, but are also, they're community members for this area, and they're able to ask these questions that are real questions. And when they get a real response, they can take that response and turn it into an engineering challenge that they can research while at SMU. We also have a social enterprise program where students can take a technological idea that has a social impact and develop a business out of it, where they can take a for-profit or a nonprofit business idea and really build a strong foundation for what do you mean when you take a social issue and you want to solve it with a technological device, like a website, like an AI machine, like a brick block. How can you take your innovation and build a sound, profitable business while at SMU? And the last program that I am particularly passionate about and leading, not biased, of course, in any way, is a program where we take our students to Peru. It's a 1-week-long course where we're partnering with the SMU Embry Human Rights Program. And we take a group of students to the Amazonian Peru to learn with indigenous Kukama communities on what does climate resilience mean. As we all know, the Amazon has been impacted by environmental issues for the past 20, 30 years when it comes to oil and gas, logging, pharmaceuticals, you name it. There's lots of resources in that place, and there's a lot of people who've been through there. And the Kukama and a local nonprofit, Minga, do a lot of work when it comes to education around climate action and resilience. And so we take students there to help them understand, boots on the ground, what does climate action look like? What does climate change look like in a place where they are dependent on the river and they're actively experiencing drought and floods? So what we do with that program is we really contextualize, what does environmental science mean? What does environmental management mean? What does engineering mean in a real world where perhaps you don't have the news on your side, perhaps you have resource constraints, perhaps you have all of these issues that you can't even think of as an engineer. How do you find a solution that's people-centered, nature-oriented, while still being respectful and giving dignity to the community and still giving back, not extracting from that community? So that's an experience that we take students on. They love it. It's very much unlike any program. They're in the middle of the Amazon with all the mosquitoes and all the trees and all the things. Thank you. Hello? Yeah, with all the wildlife, and they get to understand exactly what does it mean to be with people who aren't like you, and how do they tackle environmental challenges in their cultural context. And so this is how we basically engage our students. We try to orient the dialogue around engineering solutions and challenges to issues that are resource constrained or logistically constrained with the way our institute is funded, with the way research is funded. We've realized that engaging with students in a way that's very tactical and practical has led to the most amount of engagement. And especially like an institution like SMU, we recently became an R1 research university. What that means is Carnegie Mellon has a research classification for all universities and tier them based on how much research activity they have. And SMU was leveled high one, very research heavy. So when we have a research university that is focused on all of these engineering-based issues like natural gas leak detections in urban areas, or grid optimization, or digital twins for sustainability, where you can simulate different scenarios without having to actually use the resources, or healthy materials endeavors. There's lots of different sort of research opportunities that we want to emphasize for our students, because the research is the strongest asset that we have to provide here at the Hunt Institute for Engineering and Humanity. And with that, I will give it off to my co-presenter. If you have any questions, they'll be at the Q&A, but thank you so much. And I hope I shared and gave a good context for what we do at the SMU Hunt Institute for Engineering and Humanity. Thank you.
Hello. Awesome. Welcome to my class. I've now enrolled you all. You have a syllabus on your tables. This is for real. I'm going to make you actually do some things today that my students do so that you can kind of see what happens in the classroom today. Whenever my students have a problem with their PowerPoint, I'm like, don't worry, the real world has this problem too. It's just as bad. So they're like, oh, okay, cool. Then it feels better. Okay, so I'm Dr. Jones. I started as Junie. I grew up on a farm in Maryland, a vegetable farm, now also a vegetable and a Christmas tree farm. And yeah, my family are full-time farmers. So my background is obviously a great appreciation of nature, but also over time, I asked these big questions that my parents did not know how to answer, didn't have the time to, and I realized that the education system from high school to college to my PhD was a great place for me to ask these big questions and learn from experts in the field. So my education I credit for truly like coming into who I could be as a person, and I also want to help my students do that too. So to educate themselves about what they're passionate about, to connect with them, empower them, and also to enjoy their education as well. So I take my cue from Bell Hooks, who says that education is the practice of freedom. I educate for democracy, and that's what I'm doing. Universities serve an excellent public good, especially the public universities that are supposed to be accessible to everyone, no matter who you are and where you're coming from. So that's a little bit about me and what motivates me, but also I wanted to tell you a little bit about UTD students. So for a second, I want you to check yourself. Like, think about your idea of who you think a student is. Just picture them. Now, here's what we got. We have 30,000 students at UTD. We are also an R1 research university. Students, though, are from ages 15 to 84. That's right. So we have students who are also grandparents, veterans, parents of young children and older children. Maybe some people in this room are also students. So when you're thinking about who the student is, first off, it's not just young people. Also, they have multiple responsibilities as caregivers. Several of them, obviously, in each classroom are coming from different places that I have to try to address and connect across our differences around things that bring us together. Also, if you know anything about UTD, you know that they're really proud of their tech programs. So obviously people there are interested in business, in technology and engineering, but there are also people who are interested in becoming future healthcare workers, doctors, and also researchers themselves. They're coming from Texas, but they're also coming from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Iran, and South Korea primarily. My students in the classroom are a wonderful representation of people around the world. 36% Asian, 20% white, 14% Hispanic, 4% African American, and 0.15 American Indian. I want you to picture today what the classroom must look like from the teacher's perspective, but also from the students. If I'm their teacher up there, I have to go out of my way also to figure out and talk to them about what they care about, because my life experience is not their life experience. So as an instructor, and just so you know, I'm not exceptional. Most higher ed professors are in their head about how they can connect better, how they can check all of their privilege and biases at the door and figure out how to help their students from the best of their abilities. So I just want to reassure you that when we're talking about higher education and universities and what we're doing in the classroom, it's not what a few people on the news say we're doing. We're doing what you hope that we're doing. We're challenging people to live into their values, to use critical thought, to check their sources, to make sure that they're good citizens, and that they educate themselves about things that are important to them. So I actually want to, like I said, I'm going to enroll you in my course for a few minutes here. So you have my syllabus on all of your tables. And here's something fun. So you walk into my courses, I teach environmental studies, and people often ask me, what do we do? And I was like, well, what we do is we skill build. And how do you do that? Well, guess what? I don't bring up a whole bunch of panelists to talk about technology on the first day of school. You know why? Because the people sitting next to you in those classrooms are your most important point of connection. If you are missing out on talking to the people next to you in my classroom, you're missing out on almost everything that a course can give you. So I would like to show you how I start to break the ice, because if you've heard of the breakthrough book, Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation, I highly recommend that. At this point, what we're dealing with is we have people, and by the way, this isn't just the anxious generation of the teenagers coming into higher ed. I've seen people in this room today who are not 15, according to any kind of generalized look here, who are also been on their phone during this, other people's presentations. What we have is a society now that is so fearful of connecting to other people, who are not practiced in small talk, maybe are just afraid that if they reach out, they'll be rejected. So what we really do need to do is skill build on connecting to each other. So if you look at the second page of the syllabus, this is the thing we do on the second day of class. After I go through all the boring rules about what you can and can't do in the class and everything, we do something called creating connections and moving past first impressions. So this is based off of research that was done in a psychology study called Fast Friends Protocol. And in that study, they had people, basically strangers, come together for about 45 minutes or more and go through this list of questions. And the whole point, obviously, was to make them friends in a fast way. But you'll see this little image here, right? Self versus other. So I also want you to think about the people who are sitting next to you now, or the people that maybe sit next to you on the bus or the train or in a classroom that you've been a part of. How similar did you think you were to the other person? Did you think you had a common point of connection with them? What kind of things get in the way of that? What kind of things do you immediately look at when you look at another person that makes you think, hey, we're not going to think the same about this, or I'm not going to know what to say to this other person? These questions actually help break the ice. So the first thing you're supposed to do is think about self versus other. So the people who are sitting next to you in this room are going to be your conversation partners. No, we're not doing 45 minutes of this. Actually, I have a different question for you today. I want you to, amongst yourselves right now, talk to each other. So introduce yourselves, and then also talk about your biggest fear and your biggest hope when it comes to addressing environmental issues. So take a few minutes and get to know each other and talk about your biggest fear and your biggest hope. Could we hear from a few people? So this is really important. We're witnessing, right, a community here and what we're concerned about, but also what we're hopeful about. So would anybody like to share your fears or hopes? Put them out into the room so they can be heard. Is there a separate microphone, or should I hand this down? Or
Our greatest fear, the two of us talked, and actually we have similar thoughts about what's going on. Our greatest fear is that the people that are empowered in power who can do something about the climate changing and the things that impact it will give up and stop caring, because it's such a struggle and a battle. You know, why go to meetings at 7 in the evening when you could be eating dinner and nobody cares anyway? You know, and that was the greatest fear. My hope is that that won't happen, and that more people on board will not look at it as Democrat, Republican, or whatever religious things you belong to, that we will stay, if you want to stay Democrat, if you want to stay whatever party you are, you can do that and still work together to save the planet, and that you will recognize that it takes all of us to save the planet.
So Tonda and I agree that climate change is a big issue. So personally, we want not to use plastic, because plastic is the biggest problem. It doesn't disintegrate. So we're going to, each opportunity we get, we're going to talk to our friend. Try to recycle, try to bring your cloth bag when you grocery shopping so you don't use plastic bag. Thank you.
Awesome. So I hear fears about maybe being ignored or feeling powerless, like you're dependent on the decisions of those who are already in power. But it also sounds like we're hopeful that people will make individual choices and that people will learn that there's like a common cause we can get behind. They'll work together. So you hope for working together. Anybody else want to share? Okay. So this is like, obviously you already shared amongst each other. And you know, when we're talking about what students are doing in the classroom, it's much easier for them to talk to each other in these small groups than when you start like the big group. And we're not talking about like the professors on a stage and you're in some auditorium. I'm talking about some like small classrooms with about 20 people. It's still really scary for them sometimes to just voice their concerns and ideas. And a lot of that has to do with the teacher, the kind of like culture that they create in the classroom. But another part is obviously like let them build the muscle, talking to each other and realizing it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to share, and also you can find out that other people are thinking similar things too. I also want you to think about when you shared with the person next to you and the other people at your table, did the self and the other, did they start to overlap in your mind a little bit? Did you maybe realize that despite whatever your prejudgments were about whether or not that person would get what you care about, did something change because you took a minute to just talk to each other about one question? Yeah. And then what would happen if you spent 45 minutes talking about, my students, my favorite one that comes up that they talk about is like, what is your relationship like with your mother? I'm like, whoa, that's not the first question, don't worry, but it's supposed to build, right? Everybody's like, don't ask me about my mother, ask me about climate change. That's the thing. They walk into my classroom thinking like, I'm comfortable talking about politics. We should do this and we should do that and this is how we do it. And you know what? Most people are like that. Everybody has an idea. But can you talk to other people, and do they want to talk to you again is a really important skill in life, for sure. When I talk to people about what I do in the classroom, they're actually surprised that I spend so much time skill building. There's a framework I included on the second page of the syllabus. I call it the Civic Skills Framework. This is something that people across political parties are totally on board with. Civics, as in empowering people to advocate as a community member, but also critical thinking skills, right? Assessing information, evaluating clarity, consistency, and credibility of claims, also being creative and curious in your interactions with not just information, but let's be real, with the people giving that information. Also notice the communication and collaboration skills I also emphasize. Civics isn't civics if you're just going to vote. You also have to be in the community and talk to people before you do that. So you have to have the ability to communicate effectively in diverse social situations. Also to cooperate and collaborate on shared tasks. Yeah, that's those group projects that some people are like, never again. And you know what? If you can't leave your education with some kind of self-confidence that you can handle group projects, what does that say for your workplace interactions? What does that say for democracy if you feel like you can't trust other people to do what you need them to do? You can imagine that what happens in the classroom and the interactions and connections that people make there has huge implications for their confidence in democracy outside of it. So it's like a little microcosm of our democracy. And then I also wanted to point out like my framework. So there's obviously a reading list here because every professor has a nice reading list. So you can see like the course content that I include here. But I also want to show you the framework that I use. So the last page is really important for you. So when I think about framework of democracy, what am I doing? So like I said, there's a lot of assumptions about what professors are doing in the classroom, and a lot of people have ideas about what we should and shouldn't say. I'm very confident that I can say that I'm educating for democracy and that we have values that are associated with that democracy. The United States obviously is backed and signed on to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That came about in 1948 after the Holocaust. There were things that the government of Nazi Germany did that we decided as humanity across cultures, across countries, we never wanted to see again. So on the last page of the syllabus, you actually see something that I hand to all my students. Your list of human rights. Because as much as we talk about sustainability and solving environmental problems, often we miss the human face of the consequences of when we slow down action or we wait to be have more people on board with something. When we're looking at sustainable development goals even, you can see that human rights are impacted by how fast and slow and also how we implement sustainable development goals. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Sustainable Development Goals before. Great, right? It's a biased audience here at EarthX, obviously, but it's good. And also, right, these were supposed to be like highly achieved by 2030. They're not, and they're not across the world. And we have people signing off of agreements rather than on to agreements for them. And there's a lot to be done. But also, with the list of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right? Look at that list. Each person in this room, like as much as you might have had an education about the US Constitution, about your rights for being here in the US, like I also want you to be empowered by that list of your human rights too. Because when you're talking about language that you can use to advocate for sustainability and for people to do the right thing, people are often like, well, what's the right thing? Everybody has an opinion on what the right thing to do is. My principled approach to environmental studies is that this is first. This has to be. That the Declaration of Human Rights is where we start. And if you're empowering communities to make sure that they're taking care of people's basic needs, but also their freedom to flourish and have a full life, to be able to have a family, to be able to have a healthy community, like all of this is the stuff we can get behind together. I'm not going to talk about like luxury trips, to Venice. I've been, but you know what? I didn't lose my students faster than I ever did than when I started talking about, have you ever been to Venice? No, the students in my classroom have not been to Venice, maybe one of them every few years. I'm at a public university. Most people are educated at public universities. And guess what? At this point, we have people at the university, the median income is about $89,000. I have first-generation immigrant students. I have students that are working full-time while being students. I don't have students who are going to connect with going to national parks and preserving big, preserves of nature like John Muir, right? What I have are students who already understand the environmental issues. They take the bus, or they wish they could take the bus so that they didn't have to drive 2 hours away from like 10 miles away in Dallas. Like I have the students in my classroom who already are aware of the issues, but they also really want to know what people are already doing and how they can connect. So my second class, besides this broad overview of environment in America, is also nature, health, and community. And that's where we back into how do public health measures help us build community that is healthy? How do we achieve our sustainable development goals, particularly 11 sustainable cities and communities and 3 good health and well-being? How do we do that in a way that empowers the communities, but also, right, makes us healthier? Common sense solutions like putting in bike lanes could save us not only on air pollution, but also our physical health, our quality of life, the pleasantness of just being outside of a car with our families or by ourselves. If you are ever in Richardson and you see someone going about 20 miles an hour in the bike lane wearing boots as if she's like on a horse, that's me. So I try to practice what I preach as much as possible. And the students notice that, right? Like if I was like pulling in with my dually F-350, blowing smoke and then saying, so let's talk about environmental politics, you can imagine that the first thing they say is, you're a hypocrite, right? So when it comes to like being a professor, there's a lot we're obviously thinking about, but it all goes back to, right, if you are doing things in the name of democratic education, if you're backing what you're doing on the basis of human rights, that sustainable development goals become just par for the course. I also want to draw your attention, as the last thing I do here, to the polling numbers. So why aren't we doing anything about some of the most popular policies, right? So look up here on the right next to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So this is a poll from Pew Research. So it's a nonpartisan research organization that actually did a survey to see what people in the US would actually support. And I want to draw your attention to the numbers here. So we're going from 60 up to 90% of what people will support. So 90% would support planting 1 trillion trees to absorb carbon emissions. 84% would be for requiring oil and gas companies to seal methane gas leaks from their oil wells. 83% would be for providing a tax credit to Americans who improve home energy efficiency. And 79% would also support providing a tax credit to businesses for developing carbon capture and storage. 80 to 90% approval ratings for those policies. Those were repealed in 2025 by basically one person with too much power. So when we're thinking about democracy and empowering people, it's also important to speak truth to power and be very clear about what's appropriate in a democracy and what's wrong. Because as I'm trying to explain what we know is right and what we should be doing, we also have to address in the classroom what people are doing that is not what they should be doing according to the US Constitution and a whole bunch of other documents that I've just mentioned, right, that are also part of the backbone of our society. So it's like a weird time, obviously, to be in higher education or any education as we're trying to explain how things were supposed to be going, what should be done, and also to make sure that people don't feel hopeless. The reason I asked you to talk about your hopes and fears is also because climate emotions and your emotions in general are real, and they also motivate you to do something or not do something. People who are fearful do different things than people who have hope. So I want to try to hope that people find some courage, not just in the information that they hear in my classes, but they also feel empowered because they find a common language. They've learned that people do listen to them and they're not so scary once you get to know each other a little bit. And there is something right and there is something wrong. And there are actually some pretty clear standards that they can point to help empower them to do that. Awesome. Thank you.
So I want to thank our speakers from the higher education institutions to talk about sustainability and climate resiliency. We do have a few minutes for about a few rounds of questions. So I want to open it up to the audience for questions for these two individuals. I know we had one question earlier that I wanted to direct to Justine, talking about research dollars and research potentially being impacted by policy. Do you have an example of that for either of you at your current institution and your current situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I'm sure a lot of educators and people who work in higher ed and do research have a lot of opinions about what's been happening in the past year and a half. I know when it comes to student research and engagement and faculty research, there has been some contention around research funding and research dollars around certain initiatives. For example, we had in the engineering school a phenomenal professor who had research funding from the National Science Foundation to do a mobility equity hub where transportation issues would be research in the DFW region around mobility and equity with other partner universities. And unfortunately, this endeavor had to be postponed because of research dollars. And unfortunately, that opportunity for students to research and engage in a topic like this in a very communicated easily way was a bit difficult to wrap around. Not to say that these opportunities aren't available for students in different avenues, they're just communicated a little bit differently, but there has been some hurt when it comes to research and different initiatives in the past year and a half or so. Great question.
Any questions from the audience?
Okay, so as educators, I just wanted to ask if you've noticed any trend over time about people's interest related to just like the overall environment. I know that with specific topics, things change over time, but have you seen like an increase in, I guess, interest or just conversations as you're going about your careers?
Yes. So actually, you know what? I think everyone's interested in the environment. They're often, though, looking for what to do with their degree after they graduate, and they want to make sure that they're majoring in something and taking classes in things that they can find a job in. In the School of Interdisciplinary Studies, it's considered like something you can add on to your bachelor's in interdisciplinary studies, but that program has been growing in environmental studies for years. Like more and more students are going, you know, my degree in biology is cool, but I want to be like well-rounded in environmental issues. So we see nothing but growth in environmental studies in that department. And there's people, so the environmental studies minor that I coordinate, there's also people from across the university who added on to their engineering degree or their tech degree, their business degree. Because when you really think about it, like who do you want in your workplace in the future? Employers want people who are aware of the bigger impact of their industry so they can communicate to their customers and clients, but also like so you really are somebody who has a broad scope of how you impact the world. And obviously the next generation has more to deal with in their personal lives related to climate mitigation and resilience. So I don't have to like promote as much because at this point it's something that I think someone said earlier, right, like you learned this in kindergarten, it was during the lunch speaker. Everybody kind of heard it when you were eating, you know, but, you know, we learn about sustainability when we're really young from our educators. And by the time you're in college, some people say, well, you can't make a career in that. Yes, you can. It's a, you know, growth industry, finding environmental engineers, for finding people who coordinate environmental issues for the city, for businesses. You have government relations offices that need to know climate policy and environmental policy, and you have so much community infrastructure that requires you to understand environmental issues. So for sure there's interest and there's definitely jobs.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, there is absolutely an interest in students wanting to understand how they can get more engaged in the climate conversation. Obviously, we digest a lot of information online from TikTok, Instagram, and whatever place you get, Reddit. But it's important to understand that information obviously can be sound bites related. And so students come in with this idea of what environmental science sustainability, actually, like what they think it is. And what we have at SMU is we have this really pertinent way of saying, there's a systems thinking analytical way to process this and a way for you to get a job from it. So like I'm sure UTD does, we intersect environmental sustainability work with other disciplines. And as someone who studied environmental science, it looks like you're a student. If I were you, I would take my environmental science interest in sustainability and kind of marry it with an industrial skill set that can be applied to many different industries. Like for instance, if you want to get into carbon accounting or ESG, study finance. And you can study sustainability and you can marry the two and you're able to get a career where you can do finance and sustainability, and that will be a career that will be growing in the next 10, 15 years but you also have that finance background also to fall back on if for any reason you do feel like there is something in the market. If anything does happen, obviously we have to be proactive about the careers that we have, and environmental science isn't going anywhere. But I do see students that have this passion, but they're really scared, like, how do I really translate this into a career when it seems like the government is cutting funding or organizations are cutting funding? And so that's what I would educate, and that's what I tell our students. Like, if you want to do environmental science, tack on mechanical engineering. Do something that can make you a wider skill set person so you can have those fears and kind of comfort them in a way.
That is all the time we have for questions for this panel. So can y'all please help me in thanking our speakers for today?